If you had walked into the grand lobby of Starlight Medical Center on a rainy Thursday in Lagos, you might have missed her. She was not the kind of nurse who drew attention. Her name was Amara, and at 24, she was the youngest on the night shift. With a quiet smile and a habit of humming old gospel songs as she checked for drips. She wore her hair in a simple bun, her uniform always crisp, her shoes always clean. Some of the other nurses called her the Shadow because she moved so softly, never raising her voice, never joining the gossip in the break room. But if you watched closely, you'd see that Amara was always the first to notice when a patient's breathing changed, or when a lonely old woman needed her hand held in the dark. That night, the rain was coming down in sheets, drumming against the hospital windows, turning the city outside into a blur of headlights and puddles. Amara was making her rounds, checking on the children's ward, when her pager buzzed. VIP arrival, ICU, immediate assistance. She glanced at the clock to 13 a.m. and hurried down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The ICU was already in chaos. Doctors in white coats clustered around a gurney, their voices tense. Security guards stood at the door, blocking the curious. Amara slipped past them, her badge flashing. On the bed lay a man who looked as if he had been carved from old stone, his skin pale, his hair silver, his hands trembling. Tubes snaked from his arms, and a heart monitor beeped steadily at his side. He wore a silk robe, stained with blood at the collar. His eyes were closed, but even in sleep, his face was proud, almost regal. "Is that?" whispered one of the nurses, eyes wide. "Yes," said Dr. Okoye, not looking up. "Chief Olumide, the billionaire." He collapsed at his estate. Massive heart failure. He's 8'5". Amara felt a chill. She had heard the name, of course. Everyone in Lagos had. Chief Adeyemi was a legend, a man who had built empires, who owned half the city's skyline, who was rumored to have dined with presidents and kings. But now, he looked small, almost fragile, lost in the tangle of machines and wires. The doctors worked quickly, stabilizing his heart, adjusting his oxygen. Amara moved to the foot of the bed, quietly checking his chart, noting the medications, the dosages, the allergies. She listened as Dr. Okoye gave orders, her mind already racing ahead, anticipating what would be needed next. She didn't flinch when the chief's family arrived, 3 sons in tailored suits, a daughter in pearls, a lawyer with a briefcase. They crowded the hallway, arguing in low voices, demanding updates, making calls. But Amara stayed focused on the man in the bed. She saw the way his fingers twitched, the way his eyelids fluttered. She saw the fear beneath the pride. When the others left, she sat by his side, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort. She didn't know if he could hear her, but she spoke anyway, telling him he was safe, that he was not alone. Hours passed, the rain eased, the city outside began to wake. Amara was still there when Chief Adeyemi opened his eyes. For a moment, he looked confused, then angry, then simply tired. He tried to speak, but his voice was a rasp. Amara leaned in, offering him water, adjusting his pillow. "Who are you?" he managed, his eyes sharp. "My name is Amara," she said softly. "I'm your nurse." He studied her, as if searching for something. "You're not like the others," he said at last. Amara smiled. "I'm just here to help, sir." He closed his eyes again, but his grip on her hand tightened. "Don't leave," he whispered. "I won't," she promised. From that moment, something changed. The doctors came and went, the family argued, the lawyers whispered, but Amara became the constant in Chief Adeyemi's world. She was there when he woke, when he slept, when the pain grew too much to bear. She listened to his stories of his childhood in Ibadan, of the first house he built, of the friends he had lost. She saw the way his children hovered at the door, afraid to come closer, afraid to let go. One evening, as the sun set behind the city, painting the sky gold and purple, Chief Adeyemi called Amara to his side. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Amara," he said, "I have a wish, my last wish." She sat beside him, her heart pounding. "Tell me, sir." He hesitated, as if the words were heavy. "There is someone I wronged many years ago, someone I loved, but I let go. Her name was If. I left her behind when I became who I am. I never saw her again. I don't know if she's alive, but I need to find her. I need to say I'm sorry. Before I die." Amara listened, her mind racing. She had heard stories like this before, regrets whispered in the dark, secrets carried for a lifetime. But something in the chief's voice made her believe this was different. This was not about money, or pride, or legacy. This was about peace. "I will help you," she said, her voice steady. He looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. Promise me, I promise. And so, as the city outside moved on, as the world spun and the hospital buzzed with life and death, Amara began her search. She started with the old address. The chief remembered the house in Surila, painted blue, with a mango tree in the yard. She called, she asked, she searched. Days turned into nights, and still she searched. The chief grew weaker, his breaths shorter, his hands colder. But every time Amara returned, she brought news, a name, a clue, a memory. The family watched her with suspicion. "Why do you care?" asked the eldest son, his voice sharp. Amara met his gaze. "Because everyone deserves a chance to make things right." He scoffed, but he didn't stop her. One night, as the rain returned, Amara found herself standing in front of a small house on a quiet street. The paint was faded, the mango tree still stood. She knocked, her heart in her throat. The door opened, and an old woman peered out, her eyes wary. "I'm looking for Ifeoma," Amara said. The woman studied her, then nodded. "You'd better come in." The house smelled of rain and old books. Amara stepped inside, her shoes leaving faint prints on the worn linoleum. The woman led her to a small sitting room, where faded photographs lined the walls, smiling faces, children in school uniforms, a man in a military cap. The woman sat down heavily in an armchair, her hands folded in her lap. "I am Ifeoma," she said, her voice steady but tired. "Who sent you?" Amara hesitated, searching for the right words. "My name is Amara. I'm a nurse at Starlight Medical Center. Chief Olumide Adeyemi is my patient. He asked me to find you." For a moment, Ifeoma's face was unreadable. Then she looked away, her eyes shining with something like pain, or maybe anger. "I thought I'd never hear that name again," she whispered. Amara sat on the edge of the sofa, careful not to intrude. "He's very ill. He wanted to see you, to say he's sorry." Ifeoma laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Sorry? After all these years?" She shook her head. "He left me with nothing, not even a goodbye. I raised our son alone. He never came back." Amara's heart twisted. "He regrets it. He talks about you every day. He says he can't rest until he sees you again." Ifeoma was silent for a long time. The rain tapped gently on the window. "How much time does he have?" "Not much," Amara said softly. "A few days, maybe less." Ifeoma closed her eyes. "I don't know if I can forgive him, but maybe I need to see him. For myself." Amara nodded. "I can take you to him tonight, if you're ready." Ifeoma stood, her movements slow but determined. "Let me get my things." As Ifeoma packed a small bag, Amara called the hospital, letting them know she would be late. She texted her supervisor, then helped Ifeoma into a taxi. The city lights blurred past as they drove through the wet streets, neither woman speaking. Amara glanced at Ifeoma, seeing the lines of worry and hope etched deep in her face. At the hospital, security tried to stop them, but Amara flashed her badge. "She's family," she said, and for the first time, it felt true. They entered the ICU. Chief Adeyemi was awake, his breathing shallow. When he saw Ifeoma, his eyes filled with tears. He tried to sit up, but Amara gently pressed his shoulder. "Easy, sir." Ifeoma stood at the foot of the bed, her hands trembling. "You look old, Olumide." He smiled weakly. "I am old, but seeing you, I feel young again." She shook her head, but her eyes softened. "Why did you send for me?" He reached for her hand. "I was a fool. I thought I needed the world, but I needed you. I'm sorry, for everything." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You left me alone. Our son, he grew up without you." Chief Adeyemi's voice broke. "I know. I wish I could change it. I wish I could go back." Amara stepped back, giving them space. She watched as Ifeoma sat beside him, their hands entwined. They spoke in low voices, words only they could understand. The years melted away, and for a moment, it was just the two of them, young and in love, before the world pulled them apart. Later, as the night deepened, Ifeoma found Amara in the hallway. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive him, but I needed to hear him say it." Amara smiled. "Sometimes, that's enough." The next morning, Chief Adeyemi's family arrived, their faces tight with suspicion. They saw Ifeoma and bristled, but Amara stood firm. "She's here at his request," she said. "Let them have their time." The family retreated, grumbling. Amara stayed close, watching over her patient, making sure he was comfortable. She saw the way he looked at Ifeoma, the way he clung to her hand. She saw the peace settling over him, the weight lifting from his shoulders. That afternoon, Chief Adeyemi called Amara to his side. "You kept your promise," he whispered. Amara nodded. You still have time, sir. Is there anything else you need? He smiled, a faint, grateful smile. Just stay, both of you. So Amara stayed. She brought tea for Ifeoma, adjusted the chief's blankets, listened to their stories. She watched as the family slowly accepted Ifeoma's presence, as old wounds began to heal. She saw the way the chief's children looked at their father, seeing him not as a legend, but as a man flawed, broken, trying to make amends. As the sun set, painting the city in gold, Amara sat by the window, watching the world outside. She thought of her own family, of the promises she had made, of the lives she touched every day. She realized that sometimes the greatest gift you can give is simply to care. The days that followed moved with a strange, gentle urgency. Amara found herself at the center of a story she never expected to live, a story of old wounds, new beginnings, and the quiet power of forgiveness. The hospital, usually a place of routine and repetition, now felt charged with something different. Even the other nurses noticed. They watched Amara with new respect, whispering about the billionaire's mysterious visitor and the young nurse who had brought her. Chief Adeyemi's room became a sanctuary. Ifeoma stayed by his side, sometimes silent, sometimes speaking in the soft, private language of people who had once loved each other deeply. Amara was always nearby, attentive but never intrusive. She brought fresh flowers, changed the water in the vase, and made sure the chief's favorite music played softly in the background. Old high-life records that seemed to make his eyes shine with memory. One afternoon, as the rain finally gave way to sunlight, Chief Adeyemi asked Amara to sit with him while Ifeoma rested. His voice was weak, but his mind was clear. You remind me of someone, he said, studying her face. Someone I knew when I was young. She was kind, like you. She believed in people, even when they didn't deserve it. Amara smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. Thank you, sir. I just tried to do my best. He nodded, his gaze distant. You've done more than that. You gave me a chance to make peace. I thought I would die with regret, but now I feel lighter. Amara hesitated, then asked, Is there anything else you want to do? Anyone else you want to see? Chief Adeyemi closed his eyes, thinking, my son, the one Ifeoma raised. I never met him. I don't even know if he'd want to see me. Amara's heart ached for him. Do you know his name? He nodded. Chigiokai. He would be in his 50s now. I left before he was born. Amara promised to try. That evening, she sat with Ifeoma, gently broaching the subject. Do you know where your son is? She asked. Ifeoma looked away, her fingers twisting in her lap. He lives in Port Harcourt. He's a teacher. We talk sometimes, but he doesn't know about his father. Not really. I never wanted him to feel abandoned. Amara listened, her voice gentle. Would you like to call him? Maybe he'd want to come. Ifeoma hesitated, then nodded. I'll try. The call was brief, awkward at first. Ifeoma explained that she was in Lagos, that she was with someone important from her past. She didn't say more, but Chijioke agreed to come. He arrived the next day, tall and quiet, with the same proud bearing as his father. When he entered the room, Chief Adeyemi looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He whispered. Chijioke stood at the foot of the bed, uncertain. I'm here, sir. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Chief Adeyemi reached out, his hand trembling. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I should have been there. I should have been your father. Chijioke's face softened. He stepped forward, taking his father's hand. You are now, he said simply. Amara watched as the two men spoke, their words halting at first, then flowing more icily. She saw the way Ifeoma's shoulders relaxed, the way the chief's eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of relief. It was as if a circle had finally closed, a wound finally healed. That night, Amara sat alone in the hospital chapel, the quiet broken only by the distant hum of the city. She thought about everything that had happened, the chance encounter, the promise, the search, the reunion. She realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of a life. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to care. The next morning, Chief Adeyemi called for Amara. His voice was weaker now, his breaths shallow. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. Amara squeezed his hand. It was an honor, sir. He smiled, his eyes shining. You gave me peace. That's more than all my money ever did. As the sun rose over Lagos, painting the city in gold, Amara knew that something extraordinary had happened. She had fulfilled a dying man's last wish, not with grand gestures or riches, but with compassion, persistence, and the courage to believe that even the deepest wounds can heal. The days that followed were filled with a quiet, almost sacred anticipation. The hospital staff moved with unusual gentleness around Chief Adeyemi's room, as if they too sensed the importance of these final moments. Amara found herself reflecting on the strange way life had brought her here, a young nurse from a small town. Now, the bridge between a dying billionaire and the family he'd left behind. She felt the weight of it, but also a sense of purpose she'd never known before. Chief Adeyemi's children from his marriage visited more often now. At first, they kept their distance from Ifeoma and Chijiok, their faces tight with suspicion and old resentment. But as the days passed, something began to shift. They saw the way their father's eyes softened when he looked at Ifeoma, the way he reached for Chijiok's hand, the way he smiled at Amara as if she were a daughter. The walls between them, built over decades of pride and misunderstanding, began to crumble. One afternoon, as the city outside buzzed with life, Amara found herself sitting with the chief's eldest daughter Tola, in the hospital cafeteria. Tola was elegant, her hair perfectly styled, her voice always measured, but today, she looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red. "Do you think he's really at peace?" Tola asked, stirring her tea. Amara considered her answer. "I think he's trying. I think he's finally letting go of things he carried for too long." Tola nodded, her gaze distant. "I always thought he was invincible, that nothing could touch him. But now, I see he's just a man, a father who made mistakes." Amara reached across the table, her hand gentle. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do with the time we have left." Tola smiled, a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Amara, for being here, for helping him, for helping us." Back in the ICU, Chief Adeyemi's condition worsened. His breaths grew shallower, his voice fainter, but his mind remained sharp, his spirit unbroken. He spent his days surrounded by family, old and new, telling stories, sharing memories, making amends. Amara watched as he gave each of his children a blessing, as he apologized for the times he had failed them, as he asked for forgiveness and offered it in return. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Chief Adeyemi called Amara to his side. Ifeoma and Chijiok sat nearby, their hands entwined. "Amara," the chief whispered, his voice barely audible, "there's one last thing I want to do." She leaned in, listening closely. "In my study, at the estate, there's a red leather journal. Inside, you'll find a letter. It's for Chijiok. I wrote it years ago, but I was too ashamed to send it. Will you bring it to him?" Amara nodded, her heart full. "I will, sir, I promise." He smiled, a look of profound relief on his face. "Thank you. You've given me more than I ever deserved." The next morning, Amara took a taxi to the Adeyemi estate. The gates were tall and imposing, the gardens lush and meticulously kept. She was greeted by the housekeeper, who led her to the chief's studio room filled with books, photographs, and the scent of old paper. On the desk, just as he'd said, was a red leather journal. Amara opened it, her hands trembling. Inside was a letter, addressed in careful handwriting, "To my son Chijiok." She returned to the hospital, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. Chijiok was waiting in the hallway, his face drawn with worry and hope. Amara handed him the journal, her voice soft. "He wanted you to have this." Chijiok took it, his hands shaking. He opened the letter and began to read. Tears filled his eyes as he absorbed the words his father had written, words of regret, of love, of longing for a connection lost but never forgotten. When he finished, he looked up at Amara, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Amara smiled, her own eyes shining. "You deserved to know the truth. You deserved to hear it from him." That night, as the family gathered around Chief Adeyemi's bed, Amara stood quietly at the back of the room. She watched as the chief looked at each of his children, at Ifeoma, at Chijiok, at Amara herself. He smiled, a look of peace settling over his features. "I am ready," he whispered. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Chief Olumide Adeyemi took his final breath, surrounded by the people he loved, the people he had hurt, the people he had finally made whole. The morning after Chief Adeyemi's passing, the hospital was unusually quiet. The news spread quickly. Nurses whispered in the corridors. Doctors paused in the break room, and even the security guards at the entrance seemed to stand a little straighter. Amara felt the weight of the moment, but also a strange sense of calm. She had witnessed something rare, a man finding peace at the end of a long, complicated life, and a family discovering the possibility of forgiveness. The family gathered in the hospital's small chapel for a private farewell. Ifeoma sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed in silent prayer. Chijioke sat beside her, the red leather journal resting on his knees. Tola and her siblings filled the pews behind them, their faces a mixture of grief and gratitude. Amara stood at the back, her heart full, her mind replaying the journey that had brought them all here. After the service, Tola approached Amara, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You changed everything," she said quietly. "You gave us a chance to say goodbye, to forgive, to heal." Amara shook her head, humility in her voice. "I only did what anyone should do. I listened. I cared." Tola smiled, embracing her. "That's more than most." The days that followed were a blur of arrangements and ceremonies. The city's elite attended the funeral, reporters gathered outside the gates, and headlines filled the newspapers. Billionaire Chief Olumide Adeyemi dies peacefully. Family reunited at his bedside. But behind the public spectacle, a quieter story unfolded, a story of reconciliation, of wounds mending, of new beginnings. Ifeoma and Chijioke stayed in Lagos for a while, sorting through memories and paperwork. Amara visited them often, sharing meals, laughter, and stories. She watched as Chijioke grew closer to his half-siblings, as old rivalries softened into understanding. She saw Ifeoma's face relax, the years of pain and anger slowly giving way to acceptance. One afternoon, as the sun set over the city, Chijioke found Amara in the hospital garden. He sat beside her on a bench, the red journal in his hands. "I read the letter again," he said quietly. "He wrote about his regrets, his hopes, his love for my mother. He said he wished he could have been there for me, but that he was proud of the man I became." Amara listened, her eyes gentle. "He meant every word." Chijioke nodded. "I believe that now, and I believe I can forgive him. Maybe not all at once, but I can start." Amara smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. That's all anyone can do. As the weeks passed, life at the hospital returned to its usual rhythm. Patients came and went, emergencies flared and faded, and the world moved on. But for Amara, something fundamental had changed. She carried with her the memory of Chief Adeyemi's last days, the lessons of love, loss, and redemption. She found herself more patient with her patients, more understanding with her colleagues, more grateful for the small moments of connection that made her work meaningful. One evening, as she finished her shift, Amara received a letter. It was from the Adeyemi family lawyer. Inside was a simple note. "Chief Adeyemi left a gift for you, in gratitude for your kindness." Along with the note was a deed to a small plot of land on the outskirts of Lagos, a place where Amara could build a home, or perhaps a clinic, a place of healing and hope. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the depth of the chief's gratitude. He had given her not just a gift, but a legacy, a chance to continue the work she loved, to touch more lives, to be the difference for others as she had been for him. Months later, Amara stood on that land, the sun warm on her face, the city skyline shimmering in the distance. She imagined what could be built here, a place where people could come not just for medicine, but for comfort, for understanding, for a second chance. She thought of Chief Adeyemi, of Ifeoma, of all the lives that had intersected in those final days. She smiled, feeling the quiet joy of a promise kept, a wish fulfilled, and a future bright with possibility.